Mr. David Krayden, good night to you, sir.
Good evening to you, Nick. What a fine month it's been.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
So you tried to reach me over the past few days. I was out. I took a break for the first time in 4 years, 5 years. I left social media alone for more than 2 days, which was first time in years and years and years. So hopefully what you needed you got the information you were looking for. At least you got to put in contact with the person you were looking to get in contact with.
Yeah, we're on track. We're right on stream. Can't discuss any of it tonight, but
That's why I'm juggling around it.
the plan could be unfolding in the next couple of days, and you'll certainly be aware of it. And I'm
So happy to hear that it worked out. Happy to hear.
yeah, sure did.
So give us an update. We always start at the same place. It seems you and we always talk about the Ostrich farm in BC. So let's start right there. Give us an update as to what's going on.
Well, I talked to Katie today. Things are, as usual, extremely stressful on the farm, and she sounded physically and emotionally exhausted, but she continues to fight on. And the issue now is, I don't think they've got 10 more days. This is essentially the earliest the Supreme Court is going to come back with a ruling on whether or not they'll hear this case. The earliest is going to be within 10 days, a week from Friday, is potential. And a lot of people, of course, said, "Oh, that's great news because that gives them an extra 2 weeks just before Thanksgiving long weekend." I reported, lots of people reported, this is good news because they've got 2 weeks to essentially move public opinion, find a political solution. It was heavily rumored that Donald Trump did bring up the issue with Mark Carney, and whether or not, I haven't been able to 100% verify that, but I'm getting strong sense from the sources that this was the case, but it doesn't seem to have developed into any concrete political action from Mark Carney. Everything is status quo and everything is static. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency is clearly doing something to these birds. Katie said today they're about 100 birds short of where they were when this crisis started, meaning the crisis started when their farm was invaded and literally occupied by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA, and the RCMP. So she's telling me, and she has put this out on Facebook and X, that there's about 100 fewer birds. The only media on scene now is Chris Dacey of Dacey Media. He's a fairly minor outlet, but he does a lot of great work that has to be done on the
Agreed.
streets. And he's sort of made his specialty is what I would almost
Free
call
Palestine.
combat journalism. He's out there on the
Yep.
street asking uncomfortable questions, putting a microphone in front of politicians' faces who say, "Who the hell is this guy?" But he does this kind of work. He's been out there for over 2 weeks now. He's the only guy left on the scene. I am still considering whether I need to go out or whether if I can do more work from my home base or whether I need to be there or not. Drea Humphrey of Rebel News, of course, had to go back had to go to Toronto for the Rebel News 10th anniversary party. So she's not there anymore. But clearly, and I think Chris Dacey was able to establish this, and I'm talking to him later tonight about whether he was able to get more evidence from a Zoom camera about how many ostriches are still in that pen. And clearly, if you look at the one shot, I put it on my program today, it doesn't look like 399 or 398 ostriches, which is where we were the last time we counted. Seems to be substantially fewer. And I do believe the CFIA is again acting in a completely unlawful manner. They are carrying out an unofficial killing of these birds. I don't know how they're doing it. We've got footage of them in their hazmat costumes, running around with a lasso, corralling these birds. Why? They were supposed to just take care of these birds until the Supreme Court came down with a decision, not terrorize them, not maltreat them, not starve them, not deliberately be cruel to these animals. And that's exactly what they've done. Why have they not been charged? This is absolutely outrageous. They should be charged. The RCMP is apparently not interested in charging them at this point, despite massive evidence that they are breaking the law. They are getting away with this occupation, not only of a farm, but the adjacent farmland is owned by a relative of Katie. It's her aunt, it's her mother's sister who owns the farm adjacent. CFIA is taking that one over too, and they're not even allowed to harvest the garlic that they grow on this adjacent farm because they were filming, they were videotaping the RCMP and the CFIA running around after the ostriches. And that's somehow, that's verboten. You can't do that. So therefore, we're not going to let you pick the garlic either. But they have been, quote unquote, graciously allowed to enter their house. So they don't have to stay downtown in Vernon in a hotel or camp out someplace. I have never seen an agency in Canada this off the rails. It's like it's gone rogue. And I've reached out to an old friend of mine from the days I worked on the Hill, former agriculture minister, and I want his take on this because I really would like to know: did the CFIA operate like this prior to the Trudeau Carney regime? Did it act like this during the Harper years or even the Chrétien years? Because it reminds me, Nico, we all know of these incidents in the U.S. where government agencies that have become paramilitary, and the CFIA has become like a paramilitary organization. They're calling the shots in this. They're telling the RCMP what they can and can't do, and this is like a rogue government agency now, like the ATF in the States at times completely defies law and convention and procedure and sometimes the Constitution itself when it's carrying out its activities. And I think this is the first time we've ever seen this in Canada. Well, the RCMP, of course, has had its problems in the past with illegal opening of mail, and that's of course how we got CSIS, but that's another story. But we've never seen like a so-called or an imagined innocuous bureaucracy like the CFIA acting in this manner, and they are getting away, well, almost literally with murder if you equate the killing of birds to murder, and certainly the family at this farm does, and I'm beginning to think of it that way too. But they're getting away with this. They are acting with complete impunity, and nobody is prepared to say stop. So I'm really hoping public opinion continues to move in a big way. Katie's getting global net media attention to the point where it's very difficult for her to stay on top of things. And like I said, when I called her today, she said, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you right away. You were the 37th phone call I've had since I woke up, and so the stress is incredible. But as I keep telling people, this is not just about these poor ostriches in this terribly oppressed Canadian farm family, but it's about a government, a federal government, a Carney government that has absolutely no respect for private property, thinks it can invade somebody's farm, take it over, thinks it can just literally kidnap their animals and then start killing them through maltreatment or whatever else is going on with them. And then say, well, the laws don't apply to us because we're doing this and we're going to do it. And to hell with all of you. To hell with legality. to hell with convention, to hell with how government is supposed to be receptive. And they really don't think there's anything here. But of course, and the other issue, as I keep telling people, is that this is all about big pharma. Big pharma triumphant. This is why they don't want these birds tested. They want every last bird dead, because that's the evidence that there is such a thing as herd immunity, and that's what they don't want revealed. And it's Jerry Ritz. I couldn't remember Jerry's last name for me. Jerry Ritz, an old friend of mine. He was the ag minister for, I think, the entire Harper administration. And Jerry was always a very good friend. He's been on my show a couple of times in the past. I want to have him on to get his take on what's happening here, but also his honest assessment of the CFIA's actions and whether or not this is something they've ever demonstrated in the past. And certainly while he was ag minister, did they behave in this way? I think this is a clear and present danger to Canadian democracy. And this is indicative of Mark Carney's complete dismissal of foundational rights in this country, very basic foundational rights. And if he's allowed to get away with this, I fear for all of us in this country, because it will not prevent the government from doing this again and again and again. And of course, I've learned in the last couple of weeks that CFIA has been doing this for quite some time. This is not the first time they've invaded and occupied property. This is not time they just decided to kill animals or birds because they suspected they might have had some kind of flu in the past. And damn it all, it doesn't matter to them if they've developed immunity or if they're healthy. We're going to kill them anyway, because that's the policy. And the funny thing is, Nico, that's not even the United Nations policy anymore, as people have pointed out to me, because I get constant tips and constant assessments from my viewers who are following the story very well. I've followed it since April, and they're telling me they're not even adhering to UN guidelines anymore. The UN has far more lax guidelines than the Canadian version of that. And of course, they've always said, this is not Canadian law. This is United Nations law. It's the World Health Organization and the World Animal Health Organization. And that's not even true. And the Trump administration in the States has repudiated the stamping out policy. They no longer even follow that policy. So all of this bullshit about this having something to do with international trade agreements is absolute nonsense. The Trump administration has completely nullified the stamping out policy, and they're moving towards a routine that does not look to kill the birds, or the animals, but to find out if they've developed immunity, and at the very least to separate those infected from the rest of the population, but not to instantly start killing hundreds of thousands. And God knows, Biden killed hundreds of thousands of chickens just before he left office. British Columbia has killed, I think, 60,000 chickens this year. And it's insanity. And of course, it's not just the absolute craziness of doing this. It's pushing the price of poultry up, the price of eggs up. And it is the message is clear. Get out of the way. Your government is the boss. Your government will do whatever the hell it wants. And I think this is, if anything, I'm looking at this country right now and I'm saying it can't continue this way. And at the same time, Carney's got a gun grab going on against farmers. Carney is talking about digital ID. He'll be talking about digital monetary system very soon after that, and 4 censorship bills in front of the House of Commons right now. And this is frightening what's happening. And this is why I'm on this story day in, day out, because to me it's emblematic of a very sick, febrile government that is toxic to every Canadian out there who loves freedom, who thinks they still have some basic rights, and that doesn't think the state has the right to take those away. And if you're with me on that, well, you've got to oppose this, and we've got to keep fighting. They said in Casablanca, I love quoting this, the French resistance fighter Victor Laszlo. He's asked, "Why do you keep fighting?" And he says, "Well, you might as well ask why we keep breathing. If we stop breathing, we'll die. If we stop fighting, the world will die." And in this case, I don't know about the world, but Canada is dying with Mark Carney and this authoritarian government. And I took a little long to discuss that, but this is dear to my heart, as is Katie and that family. Very, very invested in this in a very emotional way, and I don't mind talking about it.
You know, David, there's quite a few things that I've mentioned so many times up to now where guys need to realize, Canadians need to realize that this is not a siloed problem. This is connected to C2, C8, C9, C12, Bill C63, the gun grab that's happening in Cape Breton. They're all interconnected. They're all going after our rights and freedoms. They're going into a censorship / surveillance state where bureaucrats are running the show, because that to me is exactly what's happening with the CFIA. You have a bunch of bureaucrats that have the power to pretty much do whatever they want. They're self-governed, just like the CRTC did. I don't know if you had heard about that, but what the CRTC did with the radio station, the show called Talk Truth. They're a Christian show that wanted to buy a radio station in Saskatchewan, and they blocked them, saying because they wouldn't abide to their DEI policies, they refused the sale. And in their decision, they are actually saying that it goes against charter, the first charter of our Charter of Rights. But because they're the CRTC, they have the right to go against the charter. And this is Leighton Gray, the constitutional lawyer out of Alberta, that is helping them on the case, that said so on my show. So this is nothing new, but it's happening left, right, and center. So we have to stop seeing those like siloed issues and start seeing them as a direct attack against us on all front. And as you said, something I keep on saying all the time, from the beginning, I've been looking at what's going on with the ostriches, and I've always thought the same thing. They're trying to make us forget that natural herd immunity is a thing, that I don't need to get vaccinated in order to obtain immunity. And what's happening with measles. This is exactly what's happening with measles. Just for the people out there, vaccinations have an efficiency of about 10 to 15 years. And it's somewhere between 95 to 97, and years over years, it actually loses potency. So you're less and less protected. You know, the only way to receive 100% immunity for the rest of your life, catching it, having an immune system that's strong to fight it. Just like I'm sure in your time, there were some measles parties where kids would go to, they would catch measles, they would get it when they're young, when their immune system is strong, and they would be immune for the rest of your life. Same thing for chicken pox when I was a kid. But now we need vaccination on everything. And that ostrich story, to me, from the get-go, I don't care where it ends up. It's always been the same thing. Big pharma is trying to convince us that natural immunity does not exist, and the only way to achieve it is through vaccination. It's a lot worse. It's become that the CFIA is going after the rights of farmers, because when we had Katie on the mashup a couple of weeks ago, that's what I was asking her, because I'm like, this has to be happening all over the country. And I'm going to do some research, because I'm curious to see if under Harper it was the same thing, or did it start under Trudeau to be that tyrannical, because I'm ready to bet that people weren't just as outspoken as Katie. They didn't just go to social media right off the bat like she did to try to get some exposure. Because if you're not good with social media, people are not going to learn about it, because where are farms located? In buttfuck nowhere, where they're not in the city, right? So people don't talk about it because they're in the middle of nowhere. But Katie did a great job with getting exposure. But I'd be curious to see if it was like that, if it's been going on for more than 10 years, because I got a feeling that it hasn't. But that's just my opinion. It's not facts. But yeah, the other thing, I just want you to confirm something, because I wanted to make sure I heard you properly. They started with 399 birds when the RCMP slash CFIA showed up. Then they lost one. Then there's one that died. Spirit, I think the name of the bird was. And then you're saying that they're estimated that there's 100 missing, because I've seen the videos from Chris Dacey, where he's with the Nikon with the massive lens on it, and they're able to record from afar. So people are saying that there's 100 missing. Is that what you said?
That's exactly what Katie has said. Yes, she was initially using the word substantial, but she has gone out on the limb to say that from what she's seeing, what she's hearing, it's probably up to 100. And how the hell are they disposing of these birds? Because I called her one night and she was literally chasing down dumpsters that were being hauled out. And on that particular night, she didn't find any evidence of ostriches, but she hasn't been able to obviously stop every dumpster that's going out. Why are these dumpsters even there? This is the question. I mean, are they producing that much garbage? Are these the CFIA? Are they producing that much garbage? They're not camping out on the site. They're going back to hotels every night. So I mean, they're living the life of Riley on their government expense account. So what are they producing? How much garbage are they producing? It's just, you look at it and you say, they're lying. They're obviously lying, and they think they can get away with this. And it's heartbreaking because, and I encourage everybody to go to Katie Passatnay's website, go to her X post or her Facebook page, support this family in any way you can. And I encourage you, tell Heath McDonald, our blessed agriculture minister, to get off his ass and do something about this, because this is not just heartbreaking, it's tragic, and it's making Canada more and more of a laughingstock every day as people look at us and say, what the hell kind of a democracy have they got in that country? And what a clown running this show. And what a goon squad the CFIA has turned out to be. This is nothing but a roving death squad. And you watch the interaction, for instance, with the veterinarian and these CFIA officers. It's clear these people know absolutely nothing about veterinary medicine or how to care for animals, or they don't even seem to be the least bit concerned about animals being sick. It's just a shrugging their shoulders and, well, we don't know what to do. It's pre-existing condition. They've got the talking points down very well, but there's not a shred of evidence that these people have any expertise except to kill things. And I mean that's damn frightening, because we've seen this sort of activity before where people are just trained to kill, and they don't seem to have any other operational skills. And to me, listening to these people, it's chilling, absolutely chilling, that they don't seem to have not only any empathy for the situation, sympathy for the family and the ostriches, but any comprehension of how you might actually take care of these these birds. And the fact they just don't give a damn. And it's clear that they're lying about what they're doing right now. And this to me it's beyond belief that they are essentially defying the Supreme Court of Canada, which did not tell them to carry on with the call, did not tell them just we'll get back to you in a month or so, but in the meantime, just carry on what you were doing. I told them, they gave them custody, and the custody means care, and it implies a lot more than just neglect, and that's all they're giving them. And they have played word games with the difference between a search warrant and a warrant to search. Great video out there about that. Encourage people, that you'll find it on Katie's X site or the Save Our Ostriches X site. It's a great video by, I believe it's a lawyer, explaining the difference between the two terms and how the CFIA is using the term warrant to search to justify all of their actions. And it's not even within the parameters of the law. But they're justifying this by saying, "Oh, we didn't get a search warrant. That means we have to go in and get out again. We have a warrant to search. It means we can stay there forever." Well, that's not true, and they're misrepresenting that. And I have to laugh. You go on their website. They killed all the comments, of course, because they're getting nothing but
Obviously.
negative comment, but they still say that the organization's about the caring for animals across the country. Nothing could be further from the truth. All they are is death squad, and I think people are looking at them with nothing but contempt.
I want to take one comment before we go to the next topic. But Warminster 100, why aren't the federal cons not screaming about this? They are part of the death cult parliament. And I'm trying to expose that to people all the time. Why aren't the conservatives talking about this? We know why. It's a rhetorical question, obviously. But still, the conservatives are not going to talk about it. And we know why, because they just don't want to go against what Carney's doing. Like, it's becoming harder and harder for me to not see a uniparty. I'm trying my best not to see one. I'm trying my best to give people the benefit of the doubt, but at one point you need to stop and you need to understand that this is the case. We've had a uniparty for years. Pierre Poilievre does not want to be leader. He does not want. It seems he did everything possible to lose the election. And now this, because that's a 90-10 issue. He would not lose any type of support from conservatives in Canada if he were to talk against the CFIA and what's going on with the Ostrich. He wouldn't. He would probably gain support from guys like me. But hey, here's the reality, right? He has nothing to lose, but obviously it hasn't gone through 100 different people on his staff to make sure that everything's okay, that everybody would approve of it. But hey, Warminster, you know why.
I've seen some people speculate that he's worried about losing some of the core conservative support if he criticizes the CFI, and I'm thinking, well,
of course,
what core conservative support is that? These people should be liberals then, if they really think that's how the government should be running. Pierre Poilievre has commented on it, but he's obliquely commented on it. He didn't even mention the word ostrich when he was asked about it twice last week. Didn't mention the word ostrich once. And I don't know, I do know why, but I it's incredible to me that he is taking the advice of his communications people again, who always steer him wrong. Always tell him to, don't talk about those wedge issues. Don't talk about those emotional issues that really, really get Canadians excited. Just talk about, you can talk about guns. You can talk about food banks. You can talk about the housing crisis. Those are fairly safe. But let's not get into that big pharma stuff. And Poilievre used to talk about the World Economic Forum. I was present at several rallies. The Axe the Tax rallies, where he repeatedly said, not one member of my cabinet or caucus is going to go to the WEF convention in Davos. And he always got the largest applause when he said that. That's when people literally stood up and gave him a standing ovation for saying that. Because thank God we finally got we will have a prime minister who recognizes that the WEF is a threat to our very existence. I'm not hearing anything about that now, because the communications people, of course, are telling him, "Oh, don't go there, don't go there." But you can't listen to gutless, spineless people without exhibiting some of that behavior yourself. And to me, he's missing an opportunity here. And at least he spoke out about Chris and Tamara last week, but once again, that was a little late in the game.
Way too late. Yeah.
But I think we all know that this is an issue that Pierre Poilievre should be front and center on if he wants to represent conservatives, small C conservatives, as well as large C conservatives in this country. And he's not doing that, and I think it's tragic. But I've talked to Katie about this several times, and she says, we just wish Pierre Poilievre would take 10 minutes just to talk about this, and how it's not just about liberal incompetence, and farmers aren't confused. And that really drove me nuts when he said farmers are confused over the government's act. No, they're not. They're goddamn furious. They're not confused. They know what the government's up to here. Farmers are not stupid people. And I tell you, Katie's one of the most intelligent women I've ever dealt with, and she is, and she was not even trained to be a public relations specialist. That was the last thing she ever wanted to do. But she has adapted to this assignment with brilliance. And I've told her that. I worked in Air Force public affairs for over 12 years. And I said, I didn't work with a lot of people who had half of your expertise, and you're doing the job magnificently, and you're getting the message out. And it's not like you've got a staff of 12 behind you, churning out news releases, turning out talking points, turning out the questions and answers. She's doing this largely all by herself. And and her mom is very involved in the legal side of things. But this is a family that is just in a vice right now, and it is so sad. But I'm gonna keep fighting, and I'm not giving up on this. I want to see the CFIA charged, and I want to see them kicked off the property. Out. That's what we need to do with the CFIA, and I haven't given up hope that that's not yet going to happen.
We'll see. We'll see. But, this is in reference to what we were talking about, Pierre Poilievre. Wilf is saying that if you need someone to tell you what to say, step aside, you're not a leader. And that's my biggest problem with Pierre Poilievre from the get-go. He is not a leader, plain and simple. Another thing he doesn't address at all is the new bills, Bill C2, Bill C12, Bill C8, Bill C9. He had Leslyn Lewis talk about it, but he has not addressed them to the weight that it deserves. Because if there's one thing that is worth fighting for right now, is those bills. Those bills, those will literally make us censored to a point where guys like you and I will not be able to do what we do every day anymore. And if we do, we'll get arrested and put in prison because we have the audacity of criticizing the government. But there's two things I wanted to cover. I wanted to cover Sean Fraser's comments that he made last week, because he had admitted to Andrew Lawton that under Bill C9 you could be arrested. The police at least could visit you for posting online something that is considered hate. Good for Andrew Layton. I love the way he did it, because he did it very polite, a lot more politely than I would have done it. But Sean Fraser seemed to have been stuck in a place where he didn't have a choice to answer, because you could tell he was trying to find a way out of it, but he's not smart enough. And he just admitted, yeah, this bill will apply as much in real life as it does online. Were you surprised that he admitted to that? Because I read the bill. I read all of those bills. I knew that was the case, but I'm happy that he admitted it. I just wonder if the conservatives are going to step up and say something, because in the case of Bill C2, you heard about Bill C2, right? There's more than 300 civil organizations like the Justice Centers for Constitutional Freedoms that wrote to Parliament to say, what the fuck are you doing with this? You cannot go against our freedoms like this. You hid some surveillance / censorship lines within a bill that's supposed to be about a strong border, and now they've rewritten it. They removed everything outside of the export clause. I don't know if you remember that, but the export clause where anything due to be exported can be looked at in any part of the chain of custody, meaning my basement where I store my t-shirts that I'm going to send to the US, for example, to the trucker that transports them. But the question I have for you, considering what Sean Fraser said last week about Bill C9, and considering that chances are that Bill C2 is going to die in Parliament, and they retabled Bill C12, which all the parts that people did not like from Bill C2 have been removed. Are you surprised by this, or is this a confirmation to you that Canadians are still able to push back if they're informed about those bills? Because the average Canadian is not reading 140 pages of bills, right?
Well, I want to say, first of all, there is one Conservative MP who is pushing back very hard on the side of this Ostrich farm, and it's Scott Anderson, who is the local member of Parliament. And
there you go.
I give credit where credit is due, and I think Poilievre is not doing what he needs to do, but some Conservative MPs are pushing it, and I don't know if they're getting pushed back from the caucus or from the leader, but they're pushing it. Why did Sean Fraser reveal that? Okay, very good question, Nico. Because he loves it. Because he believes in this.
Yeah.
He doesn't find that she doesn't find that shocking or devastating or in any way contrary to what his Canada is. He thinks that's great. He thinks because they want more hate laws, not less. And Andrew Lawton is perfectly positioned to be speaking about this. He's a former journalist. I think he really believes in free speech as a former journalist, and he was a former new media journalist, independent journalist in many ways. So I think he did a great job of cross-examining, interrogating Sean Fraser, who is not the sharpest tack in the box.
No.
Sean Fraser is always failing at wherever he goes. We talked about that so often. But the reason he was unapologetic about this is that he doesn't think he has anything to apologize for. This is a great law, and it's going to make speech more difficult. It's going to make hate speech more easy to identify and to punish and to prosecute. And this is insane. The conservatives, I've demanded this on the air, and of course, I don't think anyone's going to respond to me from the Conservative Party of Canada, but they need to be coming out and saying we're going to get rid of all hate laws if we become governor. We're going to get rid of hate laws because they're anathema to free speech. You have free speech because you have people who say things that are interpreted, seen as hateful, because hate, as John Carpay of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms loves to point out, hate is whatever somebody wants to call it. So hate is in the ears and the eyes of the beholder. And what is going to happen here, of course, who's going to define what hate is? Well, it's going to be liberal judges, and it's going to be the liberal government. And hate will mean anything they don't like. Hate will mean anything they disagree with, anything that doesn't go along with the narrative. So we don't need hate crime laws in this country. They're stupid. It doesn't matter if you were motivated by hate. If you kill somebody, you're motivated by hate. Doesn't matter what the ethnicity or the race or the sexuality of the person was. You're motivated by hate. That's why you kill them, and that's what you get punished for. And to tack on all of this extra baggage to the hate crimes legislation that already exists in this country, you said it. It's going to make it impossible for people like you and I to go on the air and speak openly about anything without the fear of reprisal. Did you see that video? Because you think, is there a plan here? Is this all coming together? Why are all of these laws being pushed at the same time? Well, we're catching up to the UK. And I think the last time Mark Carney was meeting with Keir Starmer, the fascist dictator of Great Britain, he was told, hurry up now, Mark, you're behind. Don't you see how the censorship laws are working in this country? We're filling the prisons with people. And if you saw that poor woman being harassed by the British cop, that is just so comic tragic. I mean, he's at her door at 2:20, and he doesn't even want to charge her. He's not sure whether the law is applicable, so he's just going to threaten her. He's going to say, well, you better take that down. You better take that post down. And she says, why? Is it against the law? And of course, he has no idea. Well, you better take it down. So we got these old school marms now in the police force in Great Britain, running the people's doors at the wee small hours of the morning, threatening them, and not even being able to charge them. They just want to intimidate them. And they've got nothing better to do. Sounds like the cops in this country are camping out on a farm in British Columbia, because that's more important to them than catching or stopping the flow of fentanyl. Oops, I can say that. The big F word. Sometimes it gets stopped on YouTube. But instead of stopping the flow of this drug at Vancouver ports and stopping it from being processed in that province, the BC RCMP are more concerned about camping out at an ostrich farm and scaring the hell out of people there instead of catching real criminals. And BC, I grew up in BC, and that province has become a shadow of what that province used to be, and it is dominated by weak-kneed politicians, useless cops, and a total misunderstanding of what people think is important. And Oh, I tell you, it infuriates me. But this is what's going on here with Sean Fraser. Totally, this is probably the most incompetent cabinet ever assembled in Canada.
Yep.
From Sean Fraser to the housing minister, Gregor Robertson, to the atrocity of this public safety minister, who is just so moronic. It's beyond belief. Gary and
Mélanie
Anandasamy,
Joly.
I think I said,
Mel-
yeah, it goes. The list
but
goes on. But
yep.
this is one of the most incompetent cabinets ever assembled. And these people really couldn't organize a potty detail. They're incredibly unfit for public service. But those are the kind of people Mark Carney likes to appoint, because I think he is the cabinet, and he is pulling
Oh
the
yeah.
strings
Oh yeah.
behind the
Yep.
scenes for them all. And who's pulling his strings? Well, we know it's
The
the global,
WEF. Oh yeah.
which he serves.
100%. Like you see with Gary Shamalapapan there, the justice minister, he admitted on the recording for the gun grab that he was just doing what Carney was telling him to do. That if he had the choice, he wouldn't do it this way, but that's what he was told to do. So that's what he's doing. And you know that that's the direction that all of his ministers have been given. You shut the hell up, you do what I tell you, or else. And as you mentioned, Starmer, they're good friends. Starmer and Mark's Carney are a good friend. And what was the game plan? They let mass immigration in. They made sure that the UK citizen got pissed off. They implemented hate speech laws. And what are they doing now? They're pushing digital IDs. It's the same fucking game plan that's happening here. Like, people don't understand that. I did the calculation by 2030. If we continue on the rate that we are right now, more than 50% of people living in Canada will not have been born here or be kids of first generation born. Those numbers are not anywhere. I made those calculations, and it's something like 50% by 2030. Like, people don't realize if this trend continue by 2037, 50% of people living in Canada will not have been born here or born from immigrant parents. We had a 16% increase over the past 10 years. Since 2015. We went from 35 million to 41 million. And I looked at where the birth rate came. Do you know that minus 1.5% came from Canadian?
Wow.
The birth rate over the past 10 years has come from immigrants, not Canadians. We lost 1.5%. So, the great theory, the great replacement theory that the WEF wants to push, it's right there. So I agree with you. The game plan that's being used in the UK is going to be used here, and we're putting the same steps together. Now people are pissed off at mass immigration. What's going to happen? They're going to start going into the street just like Tommy Robinson's been doing for years. They're going to implement censorship. I don't know if you saw that, but he was arrested on terrorism because he didn't want to give out his cell phone.
Oh,
Terrorism for not wanting to give his cell phone to the government. So people need to wake up that those censorship bill, what's going on at that ostrich farm, the gun grab is not a coincidence. It's all part of the same game plan. Just look at what happened. Did you hear about that story? The North Bay guy that was sentenced to 9 years. What was his sentence? His name was, hold on, I have it right here. I posted about it this morning. Was this guy right here. So we got a North Bay man by the name of Kenneth Paulin, has been sentenced to 9 months in jail for willfully promoting hatred against Jews. So he basically is facing, he is in prison for 9 months for posts that he made online. And I read some of his posts. I disagree with him. I don't think he's right at all. But I'm 100% free speech. I'm an absolutist when it comes to free speech. I want those guys to be able to say whatever the fuck they want because I want to be able to identify them. I want to know who those guys are. You believe in that stuff? Okay, cool. Post about it. I want to know who you people are. But I don't want my government to have the right to decide what I can and cannot say, because that's the door that's been opened now. 9 months in jail for talking against Jews. Well, it's insane to me. Absolutely insane to me.
It was Holocaust denial, and
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I've debated Holocaust deniers over the years. I firmly think these people have rocks in their head, but I defend their right to have rocks in their head and to say these
Yep.
crazy things. And it's like John Milton argued hundreds of years ago in the Areopagitica, which is basically the free speech canon. They said all you do when you suppress free speech is make it more attractive. You
Yep.
make you make these controversial, hateful, or even outright lies. If you suppress them and try to censor them, you just make them more attractive. People are going to say, "Well, there must be some truth in it. They want to put this guy in jail for 9 months." And that's exactly how people react. We need open and free speech in this country. And I noted that story too. And I said, yeah, here, this is how it starts.
Yep. There's another thing you wanted to talk about. You wanted to talk about that churches might be losing their charitable status in the upcoming federal budget. So that you're talking about the budget that's supposed to be tabled on November 4th, right?
Yes, November 4th budget. Yeah, I got a tip today from one of my viewers who noted that the House Finance Committee has approved a motion that would strip tax exempt status, not just churches, but all charitable organizations that are run contrary to the government's philosophy. And the Liberals have mentioned this in the past. They've talked about this. It almost came to fruition under Justin Trudeau. Everything is coming to fruition under Mark Carney. And this would strip any organizations like a pro-life organization, for instance, any charity that espouses pro-life positions, any church that would agree with traditional marriage and not the current same-sex marriage laws that would defy that convention. They could lose charitable status. And so it's not just churches, it's all charitable organizations. And I think there's good reason to suspect this is going to happen in this budget. I don't think Mark Carney's going to be talking about it beforehand, and very few people are talking about it. But when the House Finance Committee advances this position just weeks before the federal budget, I have a pretty good inclination to believe that it's probably in that budget. And this again is going to be devastating to people who just don't happen to agree with Mark Carney. And there's various ways to silence people, and there's the outright censorship that's coming, and that's being driven through thanks to the NDP alliance with the Liberals. We can see this happening. But there's the other way, of course, of silencing people is to take away their charitable status, and so they're therefore left hanging out to dry. But we know what Mark Carney's feeling towards Christian churches, and if they, unless they're in complete agreement with his LGBTQ agenda, they're not representing his view of Canada. So that's why he would push forth on this. And you know what we need to do uh, to stop this? I can't see any way of stopping this legislation unless there's some pushback from the left against the NDP, and this is uncharted territory in Canada. We conservatives and on the so-called right, whatever that is anymore, and liberals on the so-called left really have never worked together in this country on anything significant. But if we might be able to work on free speech, there might be some agreement there. Because I'm looking for allies in this fight, because we could be just sitting here and literally watch this country go down the tube, lose all free speech because of what, 7 new Democrats who have agreed to prop up this government, and the Bloc Québécois is completely in favor of taking away your free speech as well. They are so enthusiastic about censorship laws. So I'm very, very worried that this could soon be a fait accompli. And certainly there needs to be a hell of a lot more pushback from Pierre Poilievre, and just not in Justice Committee and with Sean Fraser on the bench. And I'd like to see Pierre Poilievre open up question period at least once a week talking about censorship, because it might even affect him. But certainly it's going to affect a lot of the people who support Pierre Poilievre out there, and And he has. I don't think he said a word about any of these censorship bills, and it's very, very disappointing.
He mentioned Bill C2 weeks after it was tabled once. It's really Leslyn Lewis. And I apologize if I'm not saying her name properly. She has an interesting first name. But she's the only one that I've seen that were really talking against C8, C9. Andrew Lawton actually did so too in front of Sean Fraser when he questioned him, which was great. But to go back to the church losing their charitable status, would that, from what you know, because this obviously this right now has not been the budget has not been tabled, so we don't have proof right now. It's a hypothesis, but do you know if that would apply to mosques? Would that apply to temples? Would that apply to all the organization? Because something I say all the time, if people ask me how I can have faith in God, I'm like, listen, bro, if you believe that women can have penises, you have a lot more faith than I do. So would that apply to the LGBTQ people as well? Would they be would all the organization out there, like let's say the Canadian hate, what's the name? The Canadian hate,
I know.
the Canadian Hate Network, the Canadian Hate Network, would they lose their funding too? Would places like Cult Montreal, would they lose their funding too? Because technically there's a lot of people that get funding from the government, so that gets tax break. Would that just be religious? Would that just be Christians? Would that be all religions? Would that be all foundations out there? Like, what's the status? Do you know? Or that's all you've heard up to now?
No, that's all I've heard. But when I can't remember the last time this was raised. It was during the Trudeau years, and I think the Parliament dissolved before they had a chance to really look into it. It's going to be selectively applied. Of course, it will be. And you really think the Liberal gun's going to go after their friends as with the same energy as they go after their political enemies? Of course not. But it's not only going to be selectively applied. The way they're camouflaging this is that if groups don't recognize fundamental human rights, and to them that means the LGBTQ alliance, that agenda, that to liberals is fundamental human rights. And by the way, abortion is also a fundamental human right, and it's in the Constitution. Did you know that? No, it's not. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in the Charter of Rights. The fact we have no abortion law in this country is disgraceful. But it's simply because we haven't had a politician with any interest in addressing the abortion issue since Brian Mulroney. No. Actually, it goes back that long, and that was a failed attempt to actually get some legislation. Canada has no abortion law, but if you're opposed to abortion, you're opposed to a fundamental democratic right, according to the Liberal Party, and that's why you should lose your tax exempt status, because you're not supporting human rights, and that's how they're going to argue this. Everybody else, of course, will be supporting human rights because they're friends of the Liberal Party. But you've seen how Trudeau and Carney have attacked the churches. They have said nothing when churches have been maligned, when Christianity is attacked. Trudeau, in a very famous interview, when he was talking about the hundreds of Canadian churches that have been burned to the ground, and largely because of arson, he said, "I totally understand that." That's literally what he said. I totally understand that, because people are mad at Christians. And of course, this is a hypocrite Catholic, one of the worst hypocritical Catholics ever to be in politics, who has the gall to say that people are mad at the Christian churches, but just the Christian churches, though. And of course, all the mythology of these indigenous burial grounds that have been located all across the country. Every last one of them was a hoax. But Trudeau, of course, spoke to that as well and said, no wonder people are mad at the churches, because they're responsible for all of these deaths that never happened. And this is going to be selectively applied. There's no question in my mind. It's more of the anarcho-tyranny that the Trudeau-Carney regime has demonstrated. Attack your political opponents, jail your political opponents, and put them in jail, and just let the other people get a light rap on the wrist and get them out on bail so they can reoffend right away. And that of course is how this government thinks. And every law is conceived and implemented with a view to persecuting and prosecuting enemies of this government, enemies of the Liberal Party, and enemies of Mark Carney.
I absolutely agree. I've said this from the get-go. Carney's here to finish what Trudeau started. He's here to finish, and it's going to get ugly. It's going to get ugly if we allow those Bill C2, C8, C9, C12, C63 to pass, if we allow the CFIA to do whatever they want at the Ostrich farm, if we don't start standing up to the government. Because, you know, I was happy to see that Bill C2 is going to probably die in Parliament, that it's been retabled as Bill C12, that people still had a voice. Because they removed almost everything that should have been removed. Almost. There's just one part that should still be removed. But to the average Canadian, it doesn't apply to them. They don't understand it. So I wouldn't be surprised if the people in Parliament don't even understand what the clause is. But at least it seems that we still have somewhat power. So hopefully the same thing happens for C8, C9, C12, even C12 right now is not bad, but C2, C8, C9, and C63 when it is retabled. But I definitely want to see more conservatives talking about this, because at the end of the day, you know, maybe we can finish on that, because that's a question I wanted to ask another conservative, because we heard that yesterday in Newfoundland, they elected a progressive conservative government. And as I was reading that this morning, I'm like, what the fuck is a progressive conservative? Is that not an oxymoron? What's the difference? Like, can you be a progressive and a conservative at the same time? So I started doing research this morning, and I even used Grok. I just asked Grok the question. It's saying, no, it's different. But in the explanation, it's like, oh, but they're conservatives that are trying to be more liberal. So I'm like, so it's an oxymoron. So what's the definition? Like, if you can give me like a minute, I'll give you a minute to answer. Is it possible to be a progressive conservative and still be a conservative? Or are you a liberal at that point?
No, it's funny. Fourth-year political science professor at Carleton University, Tom Darby, used to say progressive conservative in his Georgian accent. That's an oxymoron. And that's exactly, I said, yeah, right, Gar, that's exactly what it is. It's, can you be a progressive conservative? Yes, you can also be schizophrenic, and that's exactly what progressive conservatives are. And the best thing that ever happened under Stephen Harper was to get rid of the progressive and the conservative, and at least nominally try to have a true conservative alternative. Of course, the reason that the parties were fused, that there was a progressive party in Canada, they were largely limited to the prairies. They were almost a farmers' party. Progressive didn't have the same connotation to it in those days. We're talking in 1948. Under Bracken, who was the leader of the Conservatives, they united with the Progressive Party, reunited with the Conservatives because they were basically splitting the vote. And I don't think anybody ever thought the name would become so comical over the years, because it is an oxymoron. You can't be both progressive and conservative at the same time. It was a political attempt to unite the so-called right at the time. But over the years, as progressive increasingly became identified with woke politics, even though that's a relatively new terminology, it became more and more ridiculous. And this is why I always say, progressive conservatives, same as a red Tory. And red Tories, of course, are nothing but liberals.
Amen to that. David, bang on time, 1 hour in. Once again, I want to thank you. We do this every Wednesday, guys. 6:30 Eastern time. David and I talk about conservative stuff. As you can see, we're a bit, at least I'm going to talk for myself. I don't like Pierre Poilievre. I think he's a liberal. I want to see real conservatism come back to Canada, because it ain't happening here right now. So this is what we talk about. So if you like the show, make sure to like, make sure to comment, make sure to reshare this stream if you're on X. Make sure to subscribe to both David Krayden and to my channel at the Poiliorphans on YouTube. And that's all I got for today, for this week. And we'll catch you next week, 6:30 Eastern time on Wednesday. Have a good day, guys.
Okay.